Good afternoon. You are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's see the top stories. United States will lift sanctions on Syria in a major policy shift. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the Israeli military will enter Gaza with full force. European Union imposes additional sanctions on Russia while also considering to introduce tariffs on Ukrainian imports. US President Donald Trump says all sanctions on Syria will be lifted. The move follows his talks with Saudi Arabia and Turkish leaders on Tuesday and comes ahead of his meeting with Syria's president on Wednesday.
All American sanctions on Syria will be lifted. That's what US President Donald Trump announced after his discussions with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Riyadh on Tuesday. Both nations had urged Washington to ease restrictions on Damascus.
And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week, and very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East. I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
The decision marks a sharp shift in US foreign policy. The sanctions, first imposed under Bashar al-Assad, had isolated Syria from the international financial system and blocked investment critical for post-war recovery. The United Nations welcomed the move. A spokesperson says lifting sanctions could help rebuild Syria's economy and restore access to humanitarian aid after more than a decade of war and underinvestment.
To see relief on sanctions on Syria, to help the reconstruction of Syria, to help the Syrian people recover from more than a decade of conflict, a decade of underinvestment, and we continue to support the reconstruction, whether it's physical or psychological, of Syria, for it to be a country where all Syrians of all faiths, of all ethnicities and minorities feel safe and represented.
The move was also hailed by the Middle East Program, an American think tank based in Washington.
There's a humanitarian reason to want the sanctions to be lifted, which is that the people of Syria have suffered under the sanctions. They've suffered from natural disasters in the past few years. There was an earthquake not very long ago, and levels of poverty are extremely high. One of the biggest industries is the drug trade. One of the biggest industries is the drug trade in Captagon, which isn't good either. So if you want Syria to be able to make it as a country and not fall apart into a renewed civil war, it makes sense that you would want sanctions to be lifted and to have a chance to work with Syria's leaders to try to bring that about.
However, Kalanick also cautioned that while lifting sanctions could offer short-term relief, the United States should remain careful when engaging with Syria's new leadership. She warned that despite the changes, the situation remains volatile, and there are no guarantees about the future stability of the current regime.
Damascus is celebrating after US President Donald Trump announced the lifting of sanctions on Syria. The move signals a major policy shift as Washington looks to re-engage with Damascus' new leadership.
Jubilant crowds flooded the streets of Damascus on Tuesday after US President Donald Trump announced the lifting of sanctions on Syria, a major policy shift that sparked celebrations across the country. Fireworks lit up the sky and residents waved flags in celebration.
To be honest, it's something joyful. We are very happy. I live outside Syria, so I'm especially pleased with this decision. As you can see, everyone is happy. Thank God. May it be for the good of the country.
I thank Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, King Salman, and all the Saudi people for this moment of chivalry. Their support has been with us from the day we began the revolution until now. A million thanks.
It is a very positive step if this really happens, and we hope for the best because the people are truly tired and the conditions have been difficult in the past period. We hope for the best.
We have been waiting for this for many years. It feels like a mountain has been lifted off our chest because now people may live more freely. I expect living conditions to improve in the future. It won't be immediate, but it will take some time. I believe this time has become a bit shorter. Congratulations to all of us.
The announcement comes as Trump is expected to meet President al-Shara in Riyadh on Wednesday, signalling a potential end to Syria's years-long isolation.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the Israeli military will enter Gaza with full force in the coming days, despite ongoing ceasefire efforts and the release of an American-Israel hostage. In a statement released by his office, Netanyahu said the goal of the operation is to defeat and destroy Hamas. Netanyahu stressed that the war will not stop, adding that while a temporary ceasefire could happen, the military will go all the way until the mission is fully accomplished. Sirens sounded in the southern Israel on Tuesday night after military officials say projectiles were fired from Gaza into Israel. The sirens went off in the areas near Gaza and western Lachish. The Israeli army said 2 projectiles were intercepted by the Israeli Air Force and an additional projectile fell in an open area. No injuries were reported. With some analysts interpreting Netanyahu's words as a signal of Israel's intent to establish permanent control over Gaza, are we now witnessing the collapse of ceasefire diplomacy? Joining us now is Melih Demirtas, researcher from Ankara. Mr. Demirtas, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Demirtas, Netanyahu's statement that the war will continue even if hostages are released seems to sideline diplomacy. Has this effectively shattered the momentum for a ceasefire, or are back-channel efforts still viable?
Yes, we still hope that diplomacy can work, but Mr. Netanyahu's and his cabinet, I think, declarations are always done with full hostility, I think, full hostility to civilian populations, first of all, civilian areas and territories. We just know that these are very important to have casualties because of the famine, because of the lack of medical equipment and any kinds of infrastructure. These are all, devastated and destructed by these 1.5 year harsh military attacks from the side of Israel, first of all. Yes, we know that Hamas officials and Hamas authorities, they also have some resistance, although they know that there are some important civilian casualties and losses inside their territory, in Palestine. Still, we cannot find any durable, ceasefire agreement between the sides. Still, in the Middle East, of course, we have hope that Mr. Trump's current visit, and also in our geography, in Turkey's geography, as you know that in these days, we will have maybe another important dialogue atmosphere for the crisis in Ukraine. But still, although and despite of this diplomatic atmosphere, we cannot understand and we cannot have a meaningful answer to this Netanyahu's declarations, which is really pushing the hostility and aggressiveness of the sides.
Mr. Demirtas, on the ground, is an Israeli takeover of Gaza now not only possible but probable? What would such a development mean in practical and legal terms, both for Palestinians and for Israel's international standing?
It is not only a political question. It's a question of humanitarian, historical and cultural balance. Palestine, Gaza, these lands are important lands of many nationalities, maybe many religions also. Please do not forget that the last Pope, who just passed away in recent weeks, made important declarations about this Christian population there. We have an important population of Islam and Muslim, or of course Jewish populations belong there culturally and historically. We cannot deny this reality. But it is not about, of course, some countries' one-sided policy. I mean, Israel can take, for a while, the full control maybe of Gaza, but it could be only for a while. If we, first of all, see the future of the people, the future of all the cultures inside the geography, we must, first of all, think about diplomacy. And this diplomacy can work, as I always respond in your programs, the Libel programs, with the understanding of international organizations, first of all, United Nations. If we cannot accept, first of all, like Mr. Antonio Guterres, or United Nations authorities or diplomatic personnel authorities inside this geography, we cannot think about that one state will have a decisive victory, at least for a longer term. No, it will be not happening.
So the timing of President Donald Trump's Middle East tour, notably excluding Israel, has raised eyebrows. Do you interpret this as a deliberate snub? And what does this suggest about the current state of U.S.-Israeli relations?
Yes, it is also a sign of some change in the diplomatic corridors of the United States. We just know that, yes, Mr. Trump has a different, maybe, quote-unquote, somehow beyond his classical diplomatic traditions, but his style is somehow also an open, maybe, style of diplomacy. It is somehow not so, maybe, in line with his secret corridors or in line of the secret diplomatic styles of sometimes United States, sometimes United Kingdom. We all know that, especially in terms of his Israeli policies. But no, I think Mr. Trump will suddenly change his mind or suddenly changes his words also in his diplomatic style in Israel, I mean, in the affairs of Middle East. Now we have this first, maybe steps or first signs from the United States that this policy, I mean, especially towards Mr. Netanyahu and his cabinet, will have a stronger tone from the United States. And I hope that, and we all hope that as the rational, I mean, diplomacy makers or analysts and experts in the world, the humanity will win very near future. I mean, Hamas also has some responsibility about this ceasefire situation. But first of all, the stronger side, I mean, you must accept it, is an Israeli by the old military or special forces stances. This stronger side must decide. It will make a diplomatic step or will increase the aggressiveness for the near term.
Melik Demirtas, thank you very much for talking to A News. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un supervised the firing drill and tactical training by military special forces, according to state media. As well as observing the drills, he met with military officials and soldiers. It's reported that Kim said the most vital task is the completion of war preparations. During a visit to the Russian embassy in Pyongyang last week, Kim stated that North Korea would not hesitate to authorize the use of military force if the United States persists in what he described as military provocations against Russia. The European Union has agreed on a new round of sanctions against Russia, while also preparing to reintroduce tariffs on Ukrainian imports next month.
European Union ambassadors have reached agreement on the bloc's 17th package of sanctions against Russia during a meeting on Wednesday. According to Euronews, the measures blacklist nearly 200 vessels from Russia's so-called shadow fleet used to evade oil restrictions, along with 75 individuals and companies linked to Moscow's defense industry. The new package also bans the export of certain EU-made chemicals used in missile production, targets 30 companies accused of helping Russia bypass restrictions, and sanctions on more than 20 people and entities accused of spreading disinformation. The sanctions come as Western leaders, including Ukraine, France, Germany, Poland, and the UK, warn of further action if Russia refuses a proposed 30-day ceasefire. The Kremlin has not responded to the offer ahead of planned talks in Turkey on Thursday. At the same time, the European Union is preparing to end special trade measures for Ukraine. According to the Financial Times, Brussels plans to sharply reduce tariff-free quotas on Ukrainian exports starting next month, reversing the emergency trade deal introduced in 2022. That temporary agreement allowed most Ukrainian goods to enter the EU duty-free, helping Kyiv's economy during wartime. But the surge of low-cost grain, poultry and sugar triggered backlash across the bloc. Farmers in Poland, France and other countries accused Ukrainian imports of driving down local prices. 2 EU diplomats told the FT that the planned transitional measures will sharply cut annual quotas for Ukrainian maize, sugar and poultry. Ukrainian officials warn the changes could slash export revenue by 3.5 billion euros a year. Talks to update the broader EU-Ukraine free trade deal are still ongoing, but not expected to conclude before the 6th of June deadline.
Tensions between India and Pakistan have once again drawn global attention. But this time, it's not just the conflict making headlines. The reported use of Chinese weapons in the clash is raising new questions about Beijing's growing military influence and what it could mean for global defense dynamics.
A recent military confrontation between Pakistan and India is prompting a global reassessment of Chinese-made weapons, traditionally viewed as less capable than Western arms. Reports suggest Pakistan used Chinese J-10C fighter jets to shoot down 5 Indian aircraft, including French-made Rafales. The news alone caused the Chinese manufacturer's market value to jump by over 55 billion yuan, more than $7.6 billion. The impact reaches far outside the region. Former Global Times editor Hu Xijin warned Taiwan should take notice, given Beijing's claims over the island. In Taipei, military analysts are closely tracking the developments. Xu Haxiao Huang of a defense think tank says China's air power may now rival US capabilities in East Asia, possibly pushing Washington to consider more advanced arms sales to Taiwan. Also drawing attention is China's PL-15 missile, reportedly recovered from the crash sites. Capable of speeds exceeding Mach 5, the missile's use in live combat boosts its credibility as a serious rival to Western weaponry. This could be a turning point for China's arms industry. Already the world's 4th largest exporter, China mainly sells to developing nations attracted by low prices and flexible terms. But with global defense spending rising, its combat-tested systems could appeal to countries seeking alternatives to Western suppliers. Analysts say this gives Beijing a stronger pitch, especially in the global south. Still, Beijing is pushing forward. President Xi Jinping aims to modernize the military by 2027 through greater integration of civilian and defense industries. Recent milestones include launching a massive amphibious assault ship and test flights of what's believed to be a 6th-generation fighter jet. While the J-10C may not represent a revolutionary leap, its reported combat performance signals real progress. For China, it's a chance to show its weapons can compete, not just in design, but in battle.
The skies over central Turkey are buzzing with international cooperation as the multinational search and rescue exercise Anatolian Phoenix 2025 kicks off in the city of Konya. Among the participants, Azerbaijani military personnel working alongside forces from across the globe. The drills organized by Turkey's Ministry of National Defense are designed to sharpen operational skills and build stronger ties in humanitarian missions. Military forces from 10 nations are taking part in an international search and rescue exercise in Turkey. The Anatolian Phoenix 2025 is underway in Konya, enhancing coordination in humanitarian search and rescue operations. Hosted by the Turkish Ministry of National Defense, the drills will feature forces and aircraft from the United States, Germany, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Italy, Qatar, Romania, Slovakia and Saudi Arabia, each contributing to complex simulated rescue scenarios in challenging environments. Azerbaijan is also participating with a contingent of Air Force personnel, including pilots, support crew and Su-25 attack aircraft. Anatolian Phoenix 2025 tests the tactical readiness of each country's forces and also strengthens the coordination between nations essential in real-life crisis response. From disaster zones to conflict areas, this joint training is a rehearsal for rapid, coordinated action. The deals will build trust, share expertise, and enhance the global community's ability to respond swiftly and effectively when disaster strikes. The exercise will continue until the 23rd of May. Armenian armed forces intermittently opened fire on Azerbaijani army positions. That's according to a statement from Azerbaijan's Ministry of Defense. The shots were fired between 8:45 and 9:30 in the evening using small arms. So far, Armenia hasn't issued a statement on the incident. Armenia wants closer ties with the European Union. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said this during talks with Gert-Jan Koopman, the Director General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations of the European Commission, according to Armenian media. The parties discussed the current stage of Armenia-EU relations, including the implementation of the Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement, economic and sectoral cooperation, work on digitalization, green energy, education, infrastructure development, and democratic reforms. They also discussed the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze has addressed U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, expressing concern over what he calls the absence of high-level communication and a series of recent unfriendly legislative moves in Washington. The Prime Minister appeals for a strategic reset, urging the current U.S. administration to reaffirm its support for Georgia's democratic trajectory and sovereignty. To help us unpack this developing story and its broader implications, I'm joined by Dr. George Michelishvili, Associate Professor at the European University in Tbilisi. Mr. Michelishvili, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good afternoon.
Mr. Michelishvili, what do you make of the timing of this open letter? Is it a calculated move tied to specific developments in either Tbilisi or Washington?
Well, unfortunately, we have to say that the relations between Georgia and United States are at its nadir, and something has to be done in this regard. So the so-called Negobari Act is about to be signed, about to be passed to the Senate, and that would mean that will pretty much seal the deal between the two countries. If they are, then it will appear before the president, and in case of signing, it will signify these, I would say, massive deteriorations of the relations. So I guess this is a last-ditch attempt on the part of the Georgian government, to save the relations and to have the direct communication, which I think will be necessary in order to either diffuse the situation or to create some clarity in this regard.
So do you see any genuine prospects for strategic reset between Georgia and the United States under the Trump-Vance administration?
Again, it remains to be seen. It depends what is the information milieu the Trump administration is in with regard to Georgia. So there have been lots of press, lots of discussion, lots of narrative around Georgia. Some of them are favorable, some are less so. It's, the latest administration, the Biden administration, till the day of inauguration was pretty hostile towards Georgian leadership. Some very unfriendly gestures and legislative acts had been signed, and the Georgian leadership, the Georgian government had the hope that the Trump administration, which oftentimes negates or cancels the decisions of the Biden administration, will start the relations with Georgia from tabula rasa, anew from the scratch. So far, it seems to be delayed. So I guess the haste of the Georgian leadership is understandable. Now the ball is on the court of the United States.
Mr. Michelishvili, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Georgia's parliamentary speaker Shalva Papuashvili said that his country remains committed to pursuing EU membership. Speaking at a conference in Budapest, he criticized the EU's views on reforms in Georgia. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
In Budapest, Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili delivered a direct rebuke to the European Union, accusing it of interfering in Georgia's internal affairs and undermining democratic principles. Speaking at the conference of the speakers of parliaments of the EU member and partner countries, Papuashvili criticized EU's demands for a foreign-led vetting system for Georgian judges. He called this the violation of national sovereignty and claimed that no EU country would accept such external control over its judiciary. In his words, the centralized EU structure sometimes imposes terms that it would not accept itself. Papuashvili went further, accusing certain EU political groups of helping former President Mikhail Saakashvili and its allies to return to power, an effort that Papuashvili calls the blatant interference. The speaker also condemned the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, whose resolution in January led the Georgian parliament members to withdraw from the assembly. He said that this move shows the disrespect to people's democratic choice and confirmed the pattern of political pressure under the guise of European values. Papuashvili's central message is that Georgia remains committed to the European integration, but on its own sovereign terms, not with dictated ones. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A-News.
Railway officials from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan met this week to discuss ways to expand cargo transportation along the China-Central Asia route that has already seen a major increase since the start of the year. Fariza Kalimurzina brings more from Almaty.
In the first 4 months of 2025, container shipments from China to Central Asia saw a dramatic 104% increase. That's according to Kazakhstan's National Railway Company. This surge is largely due to stronger trade ties with China and improvements in logistics infrastructure. A key player in all of this is the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, which is becoming a major corridor connecting East and West. Last year alone, more than 11 million tons of cargo traveled by rail between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Right now, around 26 trains cross that border every day. 2024 was a record year for the Trans-Caspian route, with shipments hitting 4.5 million tons, a 20% increase from the previous year. Container traffic has surged nearly threefold, with over 56,000 containers transported. Experts say Chinese companies are driving much of this growth, with the number of container trains from China increasing nearly 35 times. Looking ahead this year, it's expected that 5.2 million tons of cargo will be moved through the road, much of it along the middle corridor. There is also a growing interest in the project from Europe, with Hungary and Serbia stepping up, offering their facilities and logistics support. Meanwhile, China is making major investments in this initiative. Authorities in Shaanxi province are set to invest more than $340 million to boost container transport along the China-Europe road, which will significantly accelerate transit through Central Asia. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A-News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A-News.